Police officer arrests black woman who insulted and refused to let her boarding, but her identity shocks everyone. By watching this video, you will gain insight into the roles and responsibilities of both citizens and officers. It serves as a reminder of the importance of respectful communication and adherence to rules. We encourage viewers to share their thoughts and engage in constructive dialogue. Your feedback is vital in fostering understanding and promoting positive change. If you are enthusiastic about this narrative, please inform us. If you appreciated the video, press 1. If not, select 0. Your feedback genuinely motivates me to collect additional, uplifting, and significant narratives.
The warm California sun was setting behind the gleaming private terminals at Los Angeles International Airport as Sarah Mitchell pulled up in her modest Honda Accord. At 38 years old, she had worked incredibly hard to reach this position in life, but she never let success change her down-to-earth nature. Today, like most days, she chose to drive herself rather than use the company car service. Sarah checked her watch, 6:45 p.m. Her flight was scheduled for 7:30 p.m., giving her plenty of time to board her private jet and head home to Atlanta after a week of exhausting business meetings. She grabbed her simple black rolling suitcase from the trunk, along with her laptop bag, looking just like any other business traveler at the airport. The evening air felt pleasant against her skin as she walked toward the private terminal entrance. Sarah was wearing a comfortable pair of black pants, a casual blue blouse, and practical walking shoes. She had learned long ago that comfort was more important than flashy designer clothes, especially during long flights. Her natural hair was styled in a neat, professional manner, and she wore minimal jewelry, just a pair of small pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. As she approached the terminal, Sarah couldn't help but smile, remembering how far she had come. 15 years ago, she had started as a junior accountant at a small charter company. Now, she owned Mitchell Aviation, one of North America's largest private jet charter companies, with a fleet of 35 aircraft in operations in 12 major cities. The security lights had just turned on around the terminal, creating a soft glow against the modern glass building. Sarah could see her company's newest Gulfstream G650 parked on the tarmac through the large windows. The jet's pristine white exterior bore the distinctive dark blue Mitchell Aviation logo on its tail, a design she had personally chosen when she took over the company 5 years ago. Several other passengers were entering the terminal, most of them dressed in expensive suits and carrying designer luggage. A few were accompanied by assistants who carried their bags and handled their paperwork. Sarah noticed some of them being greeted by name by the security staff, who rushed to open doors and offer assistance. Inside her laptop bag, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother, asking if she would make it home in time for Sunday dinner tomorrow. This weekly family tradition had remained unchanged despite Sarah's success. Every Sunday, without fail, she sat at her parents' modest dining table in their small Atlanta home, eating her mother's famous fried chicken and talking about their week. As Sarah walked through the parking lot, she passed by several luxury cars: Mercedes, Bentleys, and Ferraris. Her Honda stood out like a sore thumb among them, but she didn't mind. Growing up in a working-class family had taught her the value of money, and even though she could afford any car she wanted, she preferred to invest in her company and her employees rather than flashy status symbols. The cool air conditioning hit her face as she approached the terminal entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see the new security guard at the desk, someone she hadn't met before. Sarah reached for her ID and access card, following the security protocols she herself had helped establish. She believed in treating everyone with respect, including following the same rules she expected others to follow. A group of pilots in crisp uniforms walked past her, nodding politely without recognizing that she was their ultimate boss. Sarah liked it this way. She had always believed that true leadership wasn't about being recognized everywhere you went. It was about building a company that could run smoothly whether you were there or not. The evening sky had turned a beautiful shade of purple and orange, visible through the terminal's floor-to-ceiling windows. Sarah took a moment to appreciate the view, something she never got tired of seeing. The sight of aircraft taking off and landing, the distant rumble of engines, and the busy movement of ground crew members all reminded her of why she fell in love with aviation in the first place. Little did Sarah know that in the next few minutes, her ordinary evening would turn into something completely unexpected. As she pulled her rolling suitcase toward the security desk, She was about to face a situation that would not only test her patience, but would also spark a national conversation about prejudice and privilege in the aviation industry. Richard Cooper stood behind the security desk, adjusting his newly pressed uniform for the 10th time that hour. After just 2 weeks on the job at the private terminal, he was still trying to impress his supervisors. He watched carefully as various well-dressed executives walked through the doors, making sure to greet them with extra attention, especially the ones who arrived in luxury cars with designer luggage. As Sarah Mitchell approached the security desk pulling her simple black suitcase, Cooper's demeanor changed instantly. He straightened his back and put on what he thought was his authoritative face. Without even letting her reach for her ID, he raised his hand in a stopping motion. "Excuse me, ma'am," Cooper said loudly, his voice carrying across the quiet terminal. "The main terminal's cleaning staff entrance is on the other side of the airport. This is a private aviation facility." His tone was filled with the kind of fake politeness that barely hid his real attitude. Sarah blinked in surprise but maintained her composure. "I'm actually here to board my flight," she said calmly, reaching into her laptop bag for her identification. "I can show you my—" "Ma'am," Cooper interrupted, speaking even louder now, "I've worked in security for many years. I know how things work here." This was a lie. He had only started his career in security 2 months ago, and this was his first position at an airport. "The cleaning crew needs to use the proper entrance. I can't have you wandering around here disturbing our high-profile clients." Several other passengers in the terminal turned to watch the scene unfold. Some pulled out their phones and began recording, while others whispered among themselves. A young executive in an expensive suit smirked, which only encouraged Cooper's behavior. Sarah took a deep breath and tried again. "Sir, I understand you're doing your job, but I'm a passenger. If you'll just let me show you my—" "Now listen here." Cooper cut her off again, coming around from behind his desk. "I don't want to have to call the police, but if you don't leave right now, I'll have no choice." His hand moved to rest on his radio, making an obvious show of authority. A small crowd had gathered now. Sarah noticed some of the onlookers shaking their heads, though she couldn't tell if they were disapproving of her or the guard's behavior. She felt her cheeks growing warm, not from embarrassment but from the familiar feeling of having to maintain perfect composure in an utterly unfair situation. "Is there a problem here?" asked an older woman in a pilot's uniform, approaching the scene. She had been watching from nearby and decided to intervene. "Just keeping the terminal secure," Cooper replied proudly. "This woman claims she's a passenger, but obviously—" He let the sentence trail off, giving what he thought was a knowing look to the pilot. The pilot raised an eyebrow and opened her mouth to speak, but Sarah raised her hand slightly, silently asking to handle the situation herself. She had dealt with prejudice before and knew exactly how she wanted to address it. "Mr. Cooper," Sarah said, reading his name tag, her voice steady and professional. "I'm going to try one more time. I am here to board my flight. I have all the proper identification and documentation. Would you like to see them, or would you prefer to escalate this situation further?" Cooper crossed his arms, puffing up his chest. "Ma'am, I don't appreciate your attitude. I know every regular passenger who comes through these doors, and you are definitely not one of them. Now, for the last time, please exit the terminal before I'm forced to call security backup." Sarah noticed more phones recording now. She also saw the terminal manager, Mr. Thompson, walking quickly toward them from his office, his face showing growing concern as he recognized her. But Cooper, his back to the manager's office, continued his tirade. "Perhaps," Cooper said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you're confused about where you're supposed to be. This terminal is for private jet owners and their guests only. The main terminal." He never got to finish his sentence. The terminal manager had finally reached them, slightly out of breath and looking mortified. What happened next would change not just Cooper's evening, but his entire perspective on life. Mr. Thompson, the terminal manager, rushed to the scene with panic written all over his face. His usual neat appearance was slightly disheveled as he hurried across the terminal floor, almost knocking over a potted plant in his haste. But before he could reach them, Cooper decided to make things even worse. "I'm calling backup now," Cooper announced, pulling out his radio with an exaggerated flourish. He pressed the button and spoke into it with authority. "Security backup needed at the main entrance. We have an uncooperative individual refusing to leave the premises. His voice echoed through the now silent terminal. Sarah stood there, her hand still holding her ID and company ownership papers, watching as the situation spiraled further out of control. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, and the number of phones recording the incident had doubled. A quick glance at one young man's screen showed him live streaming the whole thing to social media. "Sir," Sarah tried one final time, her voice remaining remarkably calm despite the humiliation, "if you would just look at my identification." "Step back," Cooper ordered, putting his hand up dramatically. "Security is on their way. Any sudden movements, and I'll have to take defensive action." He widened his stance as if preparing for a confrontation, making several onlookers gasp at his overreaction. Two other security guards came running from different directions, their boots squeaking against the polished floor. They looked confused when they saw Sarah standing there quietly with her luggage, clearly not matching the emergency situation they'd been called to handle. A well-dressed businessman in the crowd spoke up. "This is ridiculous. Can't you see she's just trying to show you her ID?" His face was red with anger as he watched the scene unfold. Several others in the crowd nodded in agreement, while some continued filming. Cooper turned to the businessman, his face showing annoyance at being questioned. "Sir, I know how to do my job. This woman clearly doesn't belong here, and I'm simply protecting our high-profile clients." He emphasized the words high-profile while giving Sarah a dismissive look. Sarah noticed Mr. Thompson was now just a few feet away, looking absolutely horrified. She gave him a small shake of her head, silently asking him to wait. She wanted to see just how far Cooper would take this situation. "Ma'am," one of the backup security guards said more professionally, "could you please explain the situation?" He at least seemed willing to listen, unlike Cooper. But before Sarah could respond, Cooper interrupted again. "She claims she's a passenger, Johnson. Obviously, she's confused or trying to sneak in. I've never seen her before, and I know all our regular clients." He said this despite having worked there for only 2 weeks. The crowd had grown larger, and whispers filled the air. Some people were shaking their heads in disgust at Cooper's behavior, while others were making phone calls, apparently reporting what they were witnessing. The terminal had become a theater, and this uncomfortable drama was playing out for an ever-growing audience. "I suggest," Cooper continued, clearly enjoying being the center of attention, "that you leave now before we have to escort you out. And don't think about coming back with any fake IDs or documents. We can spot those easily." He tapped his badge importantly, though it was slightly crooked on his uniform. Sarah looked at her watch. Her flight was scheduled to leave in 30 minutes. She had planned to review some important documents during the flight, but instead, she was standing here, being treated like a criminal in her own terminal. The young man who had been live streaming suddenly spoke up. "Hey, this stream already has over 1,000 viewers. They're asking for the name of this terminal and the security company." His announcement made Cooper stand even straighter, apparently proud that his handling of the situation would be seen by so many people. Mr. Thompson had finally reached them, his face pale and his forehead covered in sweat. "Mr. Cooper," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I need to inform you." "Don't worry, sir." Cooper cut him off, not even turning around to look at his manager. "I have the situation under control. I'm protecting our valuable clients from this intruder." He said the last word with such disdain that several people in the crowd gasped. The next few moments would become one of the most viral videos of the year, as Cooper was about to learn exactly who he had been treating so disrespectfully for the past 15 minutes. Mr. Thompson finally managed to step between Cooper and Sarah, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Cooper," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him clearly, "I'd like you to meet Ms. Sarah Mitchell, the owner and CEO of Mitchell Aviation, the company that owns this terminal and all 35 private jets in our fleet." The silence that followed was deafening. Cooper's face went through a series of rapid changes. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally, as the truth sank in, a sickly pale color. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The radio in his hand slipped and clattered to the floor. "Ms. Mitchell," Mr. Thompson continued, his voice shaking, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for this incident. Mr. Cooper is new here, but that's no excuse for." "That's impossible," Cooper suddenly blurted out, his voice much higher than before. "She can't be," I mean, I've seen pictures of Sarah Mitchell in the company newsletter. She's... He stopped himself, realizing he was only making things worse. Sarah finally pulled out her ID card, company ownership papers, and pilot's license, holding them up for everyone to see. "These are the documents I've been trying to show you for the past 15 minutes, Mr. Cooper," she said calmly. "Would you like to inspect them now?" The crowd that had gathered began to murmur. Several people who had been recording everything immediately started sharing their videos. The young man who had been live streaming announced, "Guys, this is insane. The woman he's been trying to kick out owns the whole company." A pilot walking past stopped dead in his tracks when he recognized Sarah. "Good evening, Ms. Mitchell," he said respectfully, then shot an angry look at Cooper. "I hope everything is all right." The pilot was wearing the Mitchell aviation uniform that Sarah herself had helped design. Cooper's legs seemed to turn to jelly as he grabbed the security desk for support. The two backup security guards he had called stepped away from him, trying to distance themselves from the situation. One of them quickly removed his hat and nodded apologetically to Sarah. "Miss Mitchell," Cooper stammered. I had no idea. I was just trying to, I thought. Please, let me explain." Sweat began to form on his forehead as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Sarah raised her hand to silence him. "Mr. Cooper, I've been trying to show you my identification since I arrived. Instead, you chose to judge me based on my appearance. You decided, without any evidence, that I didn't belong here." Her voice remained steady, but her words carried weight that made Cooper shrink further into himself. The businessman who had spoken up earlier approached Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Jonathan Reed from Sterling Investments. What happened here today is absolutely unacceptable. I'd be happy to provide a statement about what I witnessed." Several other passengers stepped forward, offering their contact information and support. The terminal had become a flurry of activity, with people expressing their outrage at Cooper's behavior and their admiration for Sarah's composure throughout the ordeal. Mr. Thompson was now on his phone, presumably calling the head office. His face had turned an even deeper shade of red as he paced back and forth, gesturing apologetically to Sarah every few seconds. Sarah checked her watch again and addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for your concern and support. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch." She turned to Cooper, who was still leaning against the desk for support. "Mr. Cooper, I suggest you join me in my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. We have much to discuss about security protocols and proper customer service." As Sarah walked toward the terminal gate, the crowd parted respectfully. Several employees who knew her greeted her warmly, while others who had never met her in person looked on with newfound respect and embarrassment at how she had been treated. Cooper remained frozen at his desk, watching as his victim turned out to be his boss's boss's boss. The security radio on the floor crackled with another guard asking for an update on the situation. Nobody bothered to answer it. The videos of the incident were already spreading across social media, and Cooper's world had just turned upside down. The next morning, Sarah's office at Mitchell Aviation headquarters buzzed with activity. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since videos of the incident went viral overnight. The clips had already gathered millions of views across different social media platforms, with hashtags like #MitchellAviationCO and #PrivateJetPrejudice trending nationwide. Sarah sat at her desk, reading through hundreds of emails and messages. Some were from news channels requesting interviews, others from civil rights organizations offering support, and many from people sharing similar experiences they faced. Her assistant, Jenny, walked in with yet another stack of message slips. "Miss Mitchell," Jenny said, placing the papers on her desk, "Mr. Cooper has arrived. He's been sitting in the lobby for the past 30 minutes, even though the meeting isn't scheduled for another half hour." She paused before adding, "He looks like he hasn't slept all night." Sarah nodded, looking at the time, 8:30 a.m. How's the situation outside? "There are 3 news vans parked across the street," Jenny replied, "and social media is still exploding. The video has been shared by several celebrities, and people are calling for Mr. Cooper to be fired immediately." In the lobby, Richard Cooper sat nervously adjusting his tie. He had indeed not slept at all. His phone had been blowing up with messages from friends and family who had recognized him in the viral videos. His sister had called him crying, asking how he could have acted so terribly. Even his mother had left a disappointed message saying they needed to talk. The terminal manager, Mr. Thompson, walked into Sarah's office looking stressed. "Ms. Mitchell, our PR team has drafted a company statement, but they want your approval before releasing it." He handed her a document. "Also, the security company that employed Mr. Cooper has sent their CEO to meet with you. He's willing to terminate Cooper's employment immediately." Sarah read through the PR statement slowly, then set it aside. She pressed the intercom button. "Jenny, please send Mr. Cooper in now." The door opened, and Cooper walked in, looking completely different from the overconfident guard of yesterday. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale, and his hands trembling slightly as he held his security badge. Mr. Thompson moved to leave, but Sarah gestured for him to stay. "Please sit down, Mr. Cooper," Sarah said, pointing to one of the chairs facing her desk. Cooper sat down carefully, as if afraid the chair might break under him. "Ms. Mitchell," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I've spent all night thinking about my actions, and I'm ashamed of how I behaved. I understand if you want me fired. In fact, his voice cracked slightly, "I've already prepared my resignation letter." He pulled an envelope from his pocket with shaking hands. Sarah studied him for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Cooper, do you know why I drove a Honda to the terminal yesterday instead of a luxury car? Why I carry my own bags and dress comfortably rather than wearing expensive designer clothes?" Cooper looked confused but shook his head. "Because I believe character and actions matter more than appearances," Sarah continued. "I grew up in a working-class family in Atlanta. My parents taught me to judge people by how they treat others, not by what they own or how they look. Unfortunately, yesterday you did exactly the opposite." The room fell silent. Through the window, they could see another news van pulling up outside the building. "The easy thing for me to do would be to accept your resignation or fire you," Sarah said, picking up the PR statement from her desk. "It would certainly make all those angry people on social media happy. But tell me, Mr. Cooper, what would that actually solve?" Cooper looked up, confusion written across his face. He had expected to be fired immediately, perhaps even escorted out by security, experiencing the same humiliation he had inflicted on others. Instead, Sarah Mitchell was asking him a question that would change not just his career, but his entire perspective on life. The next few minutes of this meeting would not go viral on social media. They wouldn't make headlines or trend on Twitter, but they would lead to changes that would impact not just Mitchell Aviation, but the entire private aviation industry. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, looking directly at Cooper. "Instead of firing you, I want to share something with you." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out an old, slightly worn photograph. "This was taken 15 years ago, on my first day working in aviation." Cooper hesitantly took the photo. It showed a younger Sarah, standing proudly in front of a small charter plane. She was wearing a simple uniform with a junior accountant badge. "During my first week," Sarah continued, "a client refused to show me his financial documents because he didn't believe I was really an accountant. He asked to speak to the real accountant 3 times before my manager finally convinced him I was qualified." Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair while Cooper stared at the photo, his hands still trembling slightly. "Over the years," Sarah went on, "I've been mistaken for a cleaner, a flight attendant, and even a lost passenger, many times. I've been asked to fetch coffee during meetings where I was supposed to be the leader. I've had people refuse to believe I was a pilot even after showing them my license." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the news van still parked outside. "What happened yesterday wasn't new to me, Mr. Cooper. What's new is that someone finally caught it on video." Cooper's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say, Ms. Mitchell. I never thought. I didn't realize." "Exactly." Sarah turned back to face him. "You didn't think. You saw what you expected to see, based on assumptions and prejudices you might not even realize you have." She returned to her desk and pressed the intercom again. "Jenny, could you bring in the training program proposal?" Jenny entered with a thick binder and placed it on Sarah's desk. The cover read Mitchell Aviation Inclusive Excellence Program. "Mr. Cooper," Sarah said, opening the binder, "I spent most of last night working on this instead of sleeping too. This is a new training program that I want to implement across all our terminals, and I want you to be part of its development." Cooper looked up in surprise, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Mr. Thompson also leaned forward, interested. The program will include real-world scenarios, personal stories from industry professionals, and practical guidance on avoiding bias in security protocols, Sarah explained. Your experience, and more importantly, your mistake, could help prevent others from making the same assumptions. She pulled out several documents and laid them on the desk. Instead of accepting your resignation, I'm offering you a choice. You can walk away from this job, and this incident will follow you on social media forever. Or you can stay, help develop this program, and turn your mistake into a teaching moment for others. Cooper wiped his eyes with his sleeve. You would trust me to do that? After how I treated you? Sometimes, Sarah replied, the best teachers are those who have learned from their own mistakes. Your actions yesterday were wrong, but your reaction today shows me you understand that. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Mr. Thompson spoke up for the first time. This program could really make a difference, not just here, but industry-wide. Sarah nodded. We'll start with our terminals, then offer it to other aviation companies. Real change happens through education, not just punishment. She handed Cooper a pen and a different set of papers. This is a new contract. Instead of working as a regular security guard, you'll be part of our training team. You'll need to complete extensive diversity and inclusion training yourself first, then help us develop and implement this program. It won't be easy. Some people will criticize this decision, but I believe people deserve a chance to learn and grow. Cooper stared at the contract, then at Sarah, then back at the contract. The weight of this moment, this choice, was clear on his face. Outside, another news van was pulling up, unaware that the story they were chasing was taking an unexpected turn. The choice is yours, Mr. Cooper, Sarah said quietly. What's it going to be? The next few minutes would determine not just Richard Cooper's future, but potentially the future of how private aviation terminals across the country would handle security and customer service. The pen in his hand felt heavier than any security badge he'd ever worn. 3 months after the incident, the main training room at Mitchell Aviation's headquarters looked very different from a typical corporate workspace. The walls were covered with powerful photographs and stories about diversity in aviation, many of them personal experiences shared by employees. At the front of the room, Richard Cooper stood before a group of 20 new security officers, looking confident but humble. I want to show you all something, Cooper said, picking up a remote control. He clicked play on the large screen behind him, and the now famous video of his confrontation with Sarah Mitchell began to play. Several of the new officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, having already seen the viral clip on social media. This is me, 3 months ago, Cooper continued, his voice steady. I'm not proud of this moment, but I show it at the beginning of every training session because it's important for you to see how easily our unconscious biases can take over. The door at the back of the room opened quietly, and Sarah Mitchell walked in. She stayed at the back, watching as Cooper continued his presentation. None of the new trainees noticed her arrival, all of them focused on Cooper's story. I thought I was doing my job that day, Cooper explained, pausing the video. I thought I knew what a private jet owner looked like. I thought I knew who belonged and who didn't. I was wrong on every count, and that mistake taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. He clicked to the next slide, showing statistics about diversity in the aviation industry. Today, 30% of Mitchell Aviation's executives are women. 25% are people of color. We have pilots, engineers, and owners from every background you can imagine. But those numbers don't tell the whole story. Sarah smiled from the back of the room as she watched Cooper move confidently through the presentation she had helped him develop. The training program, now in its 3rd month, had already trained over 200 security personnel across multiple terminals. Last week, Cooper continued, I had a situation where a young woman in jeans and a t-shirt approached the security desk. 3 months ago, I might have made assumptions about her. Instead, I followed our new protocol, respectful greeting, proper ID check, and professional service regardless of appearance. He grinned. Turns out she was a 19-year-old tech entrepreneur who had just sold her startup for millions. She complimented our security team on being the most professional she'd encountered. That's what this training is about, treating everyone with equal respect and dignity. The training room had transformed over the past months. What started as a simple classroom was now an interactive learning space. One wall featured a wall of assumptions, where trainees posted their own experiences with prejudice. Another displayed thank you letters from passengers who had noticed the positive changes in security protocols. Cooper moved to the practical portion of the training. Now, let's role-play some scenarios. Remember, our job is to maintain security while treating everyone with respect. It's not about lowering our standards. It's about applying them fairly to everyone. Sarah watched as Cooper handled the role-playing exercises with expertise, correcting mistakes gently but firmly. The viral video that could have ended his career had instead become a powerful teaching tool. During the break, one of the new trainees approached Cooper. "Sir, I saw that video when it first went viral. I never expected to be trained by you, but this program, it's really opened my eyes." Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly what happened to me. Sometimes our biggest mistakes can lead to our most important growth, if we're willing to learn from them." Sarah finally walked forward, making her presence known. The trainees immediately stood straighter, recognizing her from both the video and company materials. But instead of the tense atmosphere that might have existed 3 months ago, there was respect and understanding. "Mr. Cooper," she said warmly, "I hear the program is being adopted by 3 other major aviation companies next month." Cooper's face lit up with pride. "Yes, Ms. Mitchell. They saw the changes in our security metrics and passenger satisfaction scores. They want to implement similar training at their terminals." As Sarah looked around the room at the engaged faces of the new trainees, she knew that her decision 3 months ago had been right. The incident that could have ended in anger and termination had instead sparked a movement for positive change across the industry. The next phase of the program would expand even further, but for now, watching Cooper teach with passion and understanding was proof enough that people could change, and help others change too. 6 months after the viral incident, Sarah Mitchell stood on stage at the National Aviation Industry Conference in Chicago. The grand ballroom was packed with over 500 industry leaders, all eager to hear her keynote speech about transforming workplace culture in aviation. As she looked out at the audience, Sarah noticed Richard Cooper sitting in the front row, wearing a crisp suit and a Mitchell Aviation Training Coordinator badge. Next to him sat Mr. Thompson, who now served as the company's head of diversity and inclusion programs. Both men gave her encouraging nods. 6 months ago, Sarah began, her voice clear and strong. A video went viral showing me being denied access to my own private jet terminal. A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Everyone in the aviation industry knew about that incident. "Today, I'm not here to talk about that moment of discrimination," she continued. "I'm here to talk about what happened afterward, and how one incident sparked a revolution in aviation security training." She clicked to her first slide, showing statistics from the past 6 months. Since implementing our Inclusive Excellence program, passenger complaints about security procedures have dropped by 70% across all our terminals. Customer satisfaction has increased by 45%, but the most impressive number? 0. That's the number of discrimination-related incidents reported at any Mitchell aviation facility in the past 5 months. The audience broke into applause. In the front row, Cooper sat up straighter, pride visible on his face. "But numbers only tell part of the story," Sarah continued. "The real change has been in people's attitudes and understanding. And to demonstrate this, I'd like to invite someone special to join me on stage." She turned toward the front row. "Mr. Richard Cooper, would you please come up here?" Cooper looked surprised but quickly made his way to the stage. Some people in the audience whispered, recognizing him from the viral video. But instead of shame, he walked with confidence. The confidence of someone who had learned, grown, and helped others do the same. "Mr. Cooper started as the security guard in that viral video," Sarah explained to the audience. "Today, he leads our training program that has certified over 500 security personnel across the country. Richard, would you like to share your perspective?" Cooper stepped up to the microphone. 6 months ago, I was the perfect example of everything wrong with security protocols in private aviation. Today, I'm proud to be part of the solution." His voice was steady as he continued. "Ms. Mitchell could have fired me. Instead, she showed me how to turn a mistake into a mission." Sarah returned to the podium. "Change doesn't always come from firing people or public shaming. Sometimes, the most powerful change comes from giving people the chance to learn and grow." She clicked to her next slide, showing images of diverse aviation professionals. Our industry is changing. Our passengers are changing. Our approach to security and service must change too. The presentation continued with Sarah announcing the nationwide rollout of the Inclusive Excellence Program. 10 major aviation companies had already signed up to implement the training, and more were showing interest. After the speech, as people crowded around to congratulate her, Sarah noticed a young black woman in the audience, probably in her early 20s, waiting patiently to speak with her. When the crowd thinned, the young woman approached. "Ms. Mitchell," she said, her voice slightly shaky with emotion, "I'm a flight school student. When I saw that viral video 6 months ago, I almost quit because I thought there was no place for someone like me in aviation. But then I followed your story and saw how you turned it into something positive. You showed me that we can change things from the inside." Sarah smiled warmly and reached into her briefcase. She pulled out her business card and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal email. When you graduate, send me your resume. Mitchell Aviation is always looking for pilots who understand the importance of breaking barriers." As the conference wound down, Sarah stood with Cooper and Thompson, looking out the window at the Chicago skyline. Private jets took off and landed at the nearby airport, their paths crossing the evening sky. "You know," Cooper said thoughtfully, "that day at the terminal could have been the worst day of my life. Instead, it became the most important." Sarah nodded. Sometimes our lowest moments can lift us, and others, to new heights. We just have to be willing to take that first step toward change. As they watched the plane soar through the darkening sky, they knew that their work wasn't finished. But they had proven that even the most difficult moments could lead to positive transformation, not just for one person or one company, but for an entire industry.